The real question is, how much of our waking day do we put our attention on matter, on the physical world, and how much of our waking day do we put our attention on energy and information? There is this elegant moment, in the research that we've done, Lynn, where when we're looking at, say, a brain scan in real time, we actually can predict and induce many times that state where a person literally gets beyond themselves. They get beyond their association to all the things that they identify with that's material and known in this three-dimensional reality. In other words, they forget that they are a physical body. They forget about the people in their life. They forget about the things and the objects that they own, the place they're sitting, the place they live, the place they work. They forget about time, trying to predict what's going to happen in the next moment or what happened in the past. In a sense, they dissociate from everything physical and material and become pure consciousness. And it is that moment that you can only talk around, where you finally surrender to trying to control and force an outcome. And that letting go process somehow is a moment of going from separation to a moment of connecting to a resource that we have available to us all the time. But the real question is, how much of our waking day do we put our attention on matter, on the physical world, and how much of our waking day do we put our attention on energy and information? And so teaching people how to get to that moment where they start connecting to that field, they'll have to understand a certain amount of science to be able to build a model. But the important point is they have to overcome some unconscious programming that you and I and all of us have fallen prey to. And that is that we are unconsciously conditioned into believing that our outer world, we need something from our outer world, an object, a thing, an experience, to change our inner world. And that means we're reliant on some exogenous substance or something outside of us. And so if we're reliant on something outside of us to change our internal state, by the same means, the more we react to any news in the environment, any condition in our outer world, our response to the environment can actually weaken the living organism. In other words, your frustration, your anger, your fear, your anxiety, your pain, your guilt, it's those reactions to events in our outer world that actually begin to weaken the living organism. So when a person all of a sudden is no longer responding to the conditions in their life the same way, I think that is the first step where the healing can begin to really sustain itself. Because you could have the most incredible meditation of your life and then get up and start reacting to your coworker, to your boss, to your ex, to your mother-in-law, whatever it is, to traffic, to the news, and you're back to that same personality that's connected to the same personal reality. And the environment now is constantly controlling the way a person feels and thinks. And if the environment is controlling a person's feelings and thoughts, then they are victim to their environment, and they're more prone then to anything in their environment to weaken them. So now they're more reliant on something in their environment to change their state. This is not that. This is where we reach the point where we say, the doctor told me I have 6 months to live. I'm in incredible pain. The medications aren't working. The chemotherapy's not working. The surgery didn't work. What am I left with? I'm left with myself and my belief in possibility. Now, unfortunately, this has been the path for many people where it is the wake-up call. It's the wake-up moment. And yet you and I have seen people who have made a decision in one moment, and I've interviewed enough people that have had spontaneous healings. I've always asked them, what was that defining moment? And they say, you know what? I realized that this stuff always made sense to me, but I had the unconscious belief that it worked for everybody else but me. I just didn't really, I never came up against that. And now they're stepping out of the bleachers and they're stepping on the playing field, because now it's the time for them to prove to themselves that it can actually work for them. This is a profound moment, because that person then makes a decision. that they're going to change. And that decision is not wishy-washy. They make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision is carrying a level of energy that's causing their body to respond to their mind. That the choice that they're making in that moment becomes a moment in time that they would never forget. And the stronger the emotion they feel from that decision, the more they remember the choice that they make. And that's a huge explosion in the quantum field. That's a nodal point where now they're giving their body a sampling emotionally of the future. And they will say to you, remember the moment I decided to change. I remember the moment I made up my mind to change. And from that point on, it was no longer labor. It was no longer work. Of course, it was challenging, but they wouldn't miss a day because they made that commitment to themselves. And so it may take them 6 months to overcome their unconscious thoughts, their automatic behaviors and habits, and their emotional responses. And then all of a sudden, from the outsider who's looking in, that person has a transcendental moment and they think, oh, that person's so special. They're so lucky they had that moment. But they weren't watching that person's change in behavior, change in thoughts, and change in emotions that led to that moment. And that elegant moment then, where they are transcendent of their personality, is the moment that that intelligence that we are connected to, whose signature is wholeness and oneness, whose signature is pure love, whatever bliss, ecstasy, can move through us. And that's the moment that the body begins to heal. That's the moment that there's a change in our biology. There's a biological upgrade that takes place. And more people are beginning to experience that because it's the 4-minute mile.
When you wake up in the morning and the receptors in the back of your eye pick up light, the moment that happens, your optic nerve sends a signal to the pineal gland, and the pineal gland starts making serotonin. And serotonin is the daytime neurotransmitter. In other words, serotonin gets you up and going. It gets your brain turned on. The moment it starts getting dark at night and your eye is no longer picking up visible light, the mechanism starts to change, and now because there's less light, the optic nerve sends a signal to the pineal gland. The pineal gland takes serotonin and starts carving off a couple methyl groups and turns it into melatonin. And melatonin is the nighttime neurotransmitter. So Sarah gets you up in the morning and Mel puts you to bed at night. Now, when serotonin increases, your brainwave patterns go into beta. That's because you're going to pay attention more to the outer world. When you're in meditation and you close your eyes and you eliminate light and it's dark in the room and you music in the background, you put earplugs in, you're getting less sensory data coming in from your environment, so the neocortex is not so preoccupied with trying to create meaning between the outer world and the inner world. You're forgetting about the outer world, and the inner world is where you're cultivating something. So then, when you close your eyes and do your meditation, then your brain waves move into melatonin. But if you're waking up in the morning, and you're waking up at 5 in the morning, guess what? Your brain waves will probably be in theta or alpha. You're in your subconscious. You're past the beta thinking, right? We go to bed at night. I have friends that are artists and playwrights and musicians. They stay up till 2 in the morning. They love that 11 o'clock till 2 in the morning. They're nighttime. They're in alpha. They got all these creative ideas. There's, me, I'm a morning person. I wake up. I'm up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. It's my time to create. I set aside a certain amount of time. That's my time, because the rest of the day I'm serving. So I like to get myself right in the morning, right? So doing that then begins to alter brainwave patterns. Now, if you move from beta to alpha, there'll come an amazing moment where if you do this right, you'll slip into theta. Now, theta is when your body is asleep, but your mind is awake.
Yes.
So think about this. If your body's asleep and you've conditioned it to be the mind through addictions or habits, the moment the body's asleep, it's no longer the mind. So there's no longer any resistance. And that's where instantaneous change takes place. If you go too far, you slip into delta, and that's called deep sleep and restorative sleep. And people say to me, well, I really can't meditate. And I say, really? Where do you meditate? Oh, in bed.
Yeah, well,
Get out of bed.
Get out of bed,
because you're going to go right to delta.
Yeah.
So then the neurons are just filled with energy, and there's a glow. And the neurons now are heightened, and they're storing energy. And that's what gives those colors and patterns during the experience. And if you switch that molecule again, it turns into the chemical that you find in mammals that are hibernating. In other words, no sex drive, no appetite, the body's in stasis. You're no longer having any drives. And what a time to dream. What a time to create a future, when the body is no longer the mind. Take that chemical and tweak it again, and it's the most powerful hallucinogenic known to man. And now you're talking about the God molecule. You're talking about the inner world as the real world, and now you are walking into a dimension. And this is where you go from space-time into time-space. And that's the vision quest, or the lucid experience, or whatever mystical moment that has been talked about for antiquity. And it takes a little bit to get people to this point, but when the neurotransmitters change, the chemicals are a downward causation of a shift in consciousness. And when that happens, holy hell, because the person will never be the same. I've had experiences, I understand them, and you can't go back to business as usual after a few of those. I think, my interest is to demystify this. Right? So
let's demystify it.
I mean, information, you teach people information, you teach them how to do it, and then it creates transformation. If we can measure transformation, that's more information to teach transformation better, and we can close the gap.